The Opposition.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. How many times, if any, has he told New Zealanders that he would not increase GST?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, before the last election I was asked whether National would raise GST in order to increase overall tax revenue to fund government deficits. I said we would not be doing that, and if a reporter asked me the same question today, I would give them the same answer. What I can also say is that prior to the advice of the Tax Working Group, increases in GST as well as changes to the taxation of property were not on the government's radar. On that basis, if I was asked about raising GST directly, I would have in good faith said no.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Question, Mr Speaker. In addition to saying, as was clearly shown on the DVD, that he would not raise GST, does he recall telling Radio Dunedin that there was no prospect of National raising GST?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
No. Order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Order. Order. The Honourable member sitting very close to her leader. She would have heard him call a point of order, wouldn't know it must be heard in silence.
Mr Speaker, I seek the leave of the House to table the transcript from Radio Dunedin yesterday, where the interviewer says clearly Mr Key did make the promise not to raise GST.
Order. I've ruled here the Honourable Prime Minister.
The member saying he's tabling a transcript or a transcript of a reporter saying he thinks he remembers that. I think it's
order. I don't need this debate to go any further because I'm not going to seek leave, because I do not seek leave for the tabling of recent media reports.
Point of order.
Point of order, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Can I seek clarification? My understanding, Mr Speaker, of your ruling to date was that something that's easily accessible to members, like a newspaper article, could not be tabled. This is a transcript of a radio station that most members of this House would not have seen. I don't believe that is within your ruling earlier.
And the Prime Minister said he hadn't heard it.
We want to know who it is so we can get the fire. The Prime Minister needs... You're so slippery.
I have hesitated a moment because it's the Honourable Leader of the Opposition who's raised, a perfectly fair and serious point of order. My ruling did say recent media articles from major daily newspapers and national weeklies or their websites, and from major television and radio broadcasters or their websites. I'm sure people from Dunedin would consider Dunedin a fairly major place. It is one of New Zealand's major cities, and I feel I do have to stick with my ruling, or I start to unwind a very important ruling that I've made. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, supplementary question. Which of the various statements that the Prime Minister has made about GST is the accurate one? His promise not to raise it, his comment on News Talk last week that he would raise it, or his comment on Radio New Zealand last Friday that he might not raise it?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, firstly, none of those are actually accurate transcripts of what I've said. They are an interpretation from the Leader of the Opposition, and therefore it should be taken with a grain of salt. But I'll tell the member, the one he should take accurately is the one in my speech last week, where it's written in black and white that the government is seriously considering a move to increase GST to 15%.
The Honourable Sir Roger Douglas.
Speaker, how much revenue would a hike in GST to 15% raise, taking into account the automatic adjustments that would be made to benefits levels, as well as the compensation for other low-income earners, which he has guaranteed, or does he not know?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, well, we know that the raise in GST raises about $2 billion. Now, there's clearly an offset, but what I can say to the member is that it's an extremely complex calculation, but if one looks at the net effect of raising GST, lowering personal taxes right across the board, top, middle and lower end, taking into consideration the other moves the government is making, it will put the bulk of New Zealanders either better off or a lot better off, and on a straight GST income tax, no one worse off.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Question, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, does he stand by his statement reported on Radio New Zealand last week that he would not put the rate of GST up if that put the government's relationship with the Maori Party at risk, which apparently gives the Maori Party a veto power.
The Honourable Prime Minister.
That was not the statement I made.
The Honourable...
Order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, I seek your guidance on this because one of the reasons of tabling documents in the House is to substantiate the question that I asked. I asked a question based on a transcript of a Radio New Zealand program. The Prime Minister has denied that he said that. Now, it's easy enough to resolve that by tabling the document.
No, order. Order. Points of order can't be used to litigate an answer the Prime Minister has given. The Prime Minister denied making a certain statement. That's the end of the matter as far as the Speaker is concerned. Point of order, the Honourable Trevor Mallard. Point of order, the Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, it's very simple. If the Leader of the Opposition wants to read out the exact quote and ask me a question about it, I'm happy to answer any of those questions. That is not what the Leader of the Opposition is doing. He is summarising things, and I've got to tell him...
The Prime Minister will resume his seat. Order, and there will be... The Speaker will deal with these issues. He does not need assistance from the back benches. These matters cannot be litigated by way of point of order. I have ruled that the Prime Minister's answer was a perfectly fair answer, and the Leader of the Opposition can ask further questions if he wishes to challenge that answer, but not by way of point of order. The Honourable Sir Roger Douglas.
Mr Speaker, given that the tax working group estimated that a hike in GST to 15% would raise $1.9 billion after automatic benefit increases, which after a compensation package for low-income earners he has promised would likely leave only $1 billion, could he not afford to pay for personal tax cuts by lowering the various expenditures which he opposed while in opposition, such as the Working for Families program, which he labelled communism by stealth?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
And when someone loses 100% of what they earn, that is communism by stealth. Mr Speaker, the answer to that question is there are a lot of other benefits involved in a GST income split. Significant benefits to the economy. The member...
I apologise. The Prime Minister... Order. I'm on my feet. Now, look, I apologise, Honourable Prime Minister, but I cannot hear his answer. And if I can't hear it, I'm sure many other people cannot hear it. Interjection's fair enough, but it must be reasonable. That was just out of all proportion. I'm calling the Prime Minister, and I fail to see where there's a point of order can be raised here. The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr Speaker, my suggestion to you is that you might be assisted in hearing if you follow the normal practice of asking ministers to address the chair.
Yes, not turn his back.
Order. I'm considering a point of order. The member makes a perfectly good point. The Prime Minister should actually address the chair, and then the Speaker can hear. While it doesn't have to be at all times, it is a little bit helpful now and then. The Honourable Prime Minister in reply.
Mr Speaker, maybe I'm the only one with amnesia, but I remember Helen Clark spending 9 years looking out there at some sort of picture in the distance. But anyway, Mr Speaker, it's quite clear. Well, that's the answer. You go and play the footage. She was out there looking into the distance for 9 years. I don't think she ever looked at me answering a question.
Order, I'm on my feet, and someone will take an early shower if I see who's interjecting. Now, we'll just take a deep breath and settle down a little. But a question was asked, and I didn't perceive what the Prime Minister mustn't do is comment on my rulings. But a question was asked by Honourable Sir Roger Douglas, and does the Prime Minister recollect the question? I invite him to answer it.
Mr Speaker, I do, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker. If one was to go and look, Mr Speaker, at the tax working group's recommendations, the recommendations and the belief behind why a GST versus income split could be beneficial were manyfold. They included benefits of encouraging New Zealanders to save more, something that we know that is a real issue, giving New Zealanders much greater choice about their own money, making sure that there was equity in the system and there was more sustainability of the future tax system. They are the range of reasons why we are considering such a move, not just about redistribution.
Point of order, the Honourable Sir Roger Douglas.
Mr Speaker, with respect, I don't think the Prime Minister tried or endeavoured to answer the primary question that I asked. The question was...
What I'll do, because of the the large gap between when the honourable member asked his question and the Prime Minister got to finally answer it, I'm going to invite the member to repeat his question without